Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into one of history's most enduring mysteries. When you picture a medieval castle rising from the countryside, towering stone walls reaching toward the sky, massive towers that have stood for centuries, who do you imagine built these incredible structures? Most people think it was just some king who snapped his fingers and ordered a castle to appear. Others assume it was armies of nameless peasants hauling stones until they dropped. But the truth is far more fascinating and complex than either of those simple explanations. The real story of who built medieval castles involves master craftsmen whose names have been lost to time, international architects who traveled across continents, skilled artisans who spent decades perfecting their craft, and yes, thousands of laborers whose back-breaking work made it all possible. But here's what's really wild about this topic. We're not just talking about construction projects. We're talking about some of the most sophisticated engineering feats of their time, involving logistics that would challenge modern project managers, workforce coordination that rivaled small armies, and technical expertise that has taken modern archaeologists decades to fully understand. Tonight, I'm going to walk you through the entire hierarchy of castle builders, from the masterminds who designed these fortresses to the quarrymen who split stones with nothing but hammers and wedges. We'll explore how a single castle project could employ over 3,000 workers, cost more than entire kingdoms could afford, and take decades to complete. And here's the part that blew my mind when I first learned about it. Some of these medieval builders were so skilled that when Notre Dame Cathedral needed restoration after the 2019 fire, experts actually consulted with craftsmen who are building a castle right now using only 13th century tools and techniques. But before we get into the fascinating details of medieval construction crews, let me set the stage with something that happened in June of 1273 that changed castle building forever. Picture this scene. A massive feast is underway at a newly completed castle in Savoy. 10 oxen and 59 lambs are being served to celebrate an important visitor. That visitor was King Edward I of England, fresh from fighting in the Crusades and on his way home. But this wasn't just any social visit. Edward was about to meet a man who would become one of the greatest architects in medieval history, a master builder whose work would reshape the landscape of Wales and create some of the most impressive castles ever constructed. That man was Master James of St. George, and his story perfectly illustrates just how sophisticated and international the world of medieval castle building really was. James wasn't some local craftsman who happened to know how to stack stones. He was a highly educated professional architect, engineer and project manager all rolled into one. When Edward met him at that feast, James had already proven his skills by overseeing the construction of the very castle where they were dining. Edward was so impressed that he essentially headhunted James to come to England and lead his massive castle building campaign in Wales. This kind of international recruitment wasn't unusual in the medieval world. The best castle builders were celebrities of their time, sought after by kings and nobles across Europe. They commanded enormous salaries, equivalent to senior court officials, and had the kind of job security that most people could only dream of. Master James, for instance, was appointed Master of the Royal Works in Wales around 1285, drawing a wage of 3 shillings per day. To put that in perspective, that was enough to support a comfortable lifestyle and represented recognition of his immense value to the crown. But here's where it gets really interesting. These master builders weren't working alone or even with small teams. A typical large castle construction project required approximately 3,000 workers operating in a carefully orchestrated hierarchy. At the top, you had the master builder or master mason, who served as the chief architect and project manager. Below him were hundreds of skilled craftsmen, each specializing in different trades essential to castle construction. And supporting all of them were thousands of laborers handling the heavy work that made everything else possible. The master mason held unprecedented responsibility in these projects. Once a lord had chosen his building site, he and his selected master mason would begin drawing detailed plans for the castle. These weren't simple sketches either. Medieval castle plans had to account for defensive requirements, practical living needs, structural engineering challenges, aesthetic considerations, and budget constraints all at the same time. The master mason had to balance military strategy with architectural beauty, cutting-edge defensive technology with traditional building techniques. Think about what that actually meant in practical terms. The master mason needed to understand siege warfare well enough to design walls that could withstand the latest military technology. He needed to know structural engineering principles to ensure his towers wouldn't collapse under their own weight. He had to understand logistics well enough to coordinate the delivery of materials from multiple quarries, manage supply chains that stretched across entire regions, and keep thousands of workers fed, housed, and productive for years or even decades. And the technical challenges were enormous. Medieval builders had to work with materials that varied dramatically in quality and characteristics. Stone from different quarries had different properties, strengths, and weaknesses. Lime mortar had to be mixed to precise specifications and applied under the right weather conditions. Timber had to be seasoned properly and shaped using hand tools. Iron components had to be forged on site by blacksmiths working with primitive furnaces. The skilled craftsmen working under the master mason formed the backbone of castle construction. Stonemasons represented the most crucial skilled workforce, responsible for the precise cutting, shaping, and laying of stones that formed the castle's primary structure. This wasn't rough work either. These craftsmen had to cut stones to perfect geometrical shapes for windows, doors, chimneys, staircases, every piece shaped stone by stone with hand tools. The level of precision required took years of training and experience to master. But stonemasons were just one part of a much larger skilled workforce. Carpenters created all the wooden elements, including roofs, floors, scaffolding, and interior fittings. Medieval carpentry was incredibly sophisticated, involving complex joinery techniques that allowed wooden structures to flex and move without breaking. Blacksmiths forged not just nails and hinges, but also the specialized tools that other craftsmen needed to do their jobs. They made chisels for stonemasons, saws for carpenters, and the iron reinforcements that held massive wooden doors together. Quarrymen represented another critical specialized trade. These weren't just workers who dug stones out of the ground. Professional quarrymen could read rock faces like books, understanding exactly where and how to split stones to get the best building material. They would drive lines of holes into stone faces, then use wedges to create controlled fractures that split stones along natural grain lines. This required deep understanding of geological properties and material behavior that was passed down through generations of craftsmen. The organization of all these skilled trades followed established guild traditions and apprenticeship systems that ensured quality control and knowledge transfer across generations. Young men would spend years learning their craft under master craftsmen, gradually working their way up from basic tasks to complex specialized work. This system created a pool of highly skilled workers who understood not just their own trade, but how their work fit into the larger construction project. And then there were the unskilled laborers, who represented the largest component of castle construction crews. While they might not have had specialized training, these workers performed the essential tasks that made all the skilled work possible. They transported materials from quarries to construction sites, prepared the ground for foundations, mixed mortar, carried stones up scaffolding, and handled hundreds of other physically demanding jobs. Despite being classified as unskilled, many of these workers possessed considerable practical knowledge about construction techniques and materials handling. The recruitment of workers often involved complex arrangements between lords and their tenants, reflecting the feudal obligations that underpinned medieval society. For earth and timber castles, lords could often rely on their tenants who already possessed the necessary skills of felling trees, digging, and working timber. These workers might be obligated to provide labour as part of their feudal duties, meaning the lord wouldn't have to pay them in cash. But for major stone castles, the workforce requirements were so enormous that recruitment had to extend far beyond local tenants. Master James of St. George's detailed account of building BORIS Castle reveals the staggering scale involved. He explained that they needed 400 masons, both cutters and layers, together with 2,000 less skilled workmen, 100 carts, 60 wagons, and 30 boats bringing stone and sea coal, 200 quarrymen, 30 smiths, and carpenters for putting in the joists and floorboards and other necessary jobs. Just imagine trying to coordinate all of that. You're talking about managing a workforce larger than many medieval towns, coordinating transportation systems that involved hundreds of carts and boats, and maintaining supply chains that stretched across multiple regions. The logistics alone were mind-boggling, requiring the kind of project management skills that would be impressive even by modern standards. The seasonal nature of medieval construction created additional complexity. Work couldn't usually take place in winter or early spring because it was too difficult to work in wet conditions. Even when weather permitted construction, the sheer size of castle projects meant they would take many years to complete. Dover Castle, for example, took 10 years to build, and that was considered relatively fast for a major fortification. During agricultural peak seasons, many workers would return to farming activities, creating massive scheduling challenges that construction managers had to navigate carefully. Picture trying to build a castle when half your workforce disappears every harvest season. This meant that castle construction had to be planned around agricultural cycles, with the most labour-intensive work scheduled for times when farm workers were available. The financing of these projects reveals just how economically devastating castle construction could be. The cost of a large castle, anywhere from £1,000 to £10,000 in medieval currency, would consume the income from several manors for years. To put that in perspective, Edward I's castle building campaign in Wales cost £80,000 between 1277 and 1304, and £95,000 by 1329. These weren't just large numbers on parchment. This represented the mobilization of vast human and material resources across entire kingdoms. The proportion of construction costs dedicated to labour shows just how human-intensive medieval building was. While it took 30 men to build a castle during the Middle Ages, today it would take less than half that number. Labour costs amounted to 83% of the overall cost, around £1,400, compared to 70% today. This reflects not only the manual nature of medieval construction, but also the extended timeframes required for completion, with projects often spanning decades and requiring sustained workforce commitment. The payment systems for these massive workforces were complex and often didn't involve much actual money. In the early days of castle building, workers received wages in the form of corn, wine, oil, and occasionally coins. They received these types of payment because medieval society valued goods from the East, and coined money was often scarce. Most workers were paid by the day, and job security was precarious, especially for the lowest level servants who could be dismissed when a castle lord travelled away. More skilled workers enjoyed better conditions and compensation. The castle chaplain, steward, marshal, and other specialists were paid by the year and might receive money and land in return for loyal service. This created strong incentives for workers to develop specialized skills and demonstrate loyalty to their employers, fostering the development of increasingly sophisticated construction techniques. The tools and techniques employed by medieval builders were far more sophisticated than most people realize. Workers used traditional tools to measure and lay out castle pieces with remarkable precision. Craftsmen used long ropes with knots placed every meter to measure wood beams and lay out pieces. They used wooden right angles and calipers for measurements. A wooden triangle with a line and plumb bob suspended from one angle served as a level when placing stones. These precision instruments enabled medieval craftsmen to achieve accuracy that has allowed their structures to survive for centuries. The stone working process required specialized knowledge that took years to master. To split stones for walls, quarrymen would read the rock face to identify natural fracture lines. They would drive a line of holes into the stone, then pound wedges into the holes, creating shock waves that broke the stone along predictable patterns. This intimate knowledge of materials allowed quarrymen to extract usable building stone efficiently while minimizing waste and maximizing structural integrity. Foundation construction represented one of the most critical and technically demanding aspects of castle building. The construction site would be prepared by leveling the ground and excavating trenches for foundations. Large stones or wooden piles would be driven into the ground to provide stability. For motte and bailey castles, workers constructed raised earthen mounds using layers of soil, clay, and compacted gravel. These foundation techniques demonstrate sophisticated understanding of load distribution and ground conditions, essential for supporting the enormous weight of stone castle structures. Wall construction involved complex techniques for creating both durable and defensively effective structures. With foundations complete, masons stacked cut stones in horizontal layers called courses. Outer layers used smooth ashlar blocks, while the center was packed with rubble and mortar. Lime mortar, made by burning limestone and mixing it with sand and water, held the stones together. This multi-layer construction created walls that were structurally sound and economically efficient, using high-quality dressed stone only where visible while employing cheaper rubble fill in the interior. The development of lifting and moving equipment represented crucial technological innovations that enabled increasingly ambitious castle projects. Medieval machines, like the treadwheel crane, became indispensable during construction, and techniques for building wooden scaffolding were improved from ancient methods. These mechanical devices allowed relatively small crews to move enormous stones to great heights, making possible the tall towers and massive walls that characterize medieval castle architecture. Religious figures also played important roles in castle construction, revealing the interconnected nature of medieval society. Gundulf, a Norman who accompanied William's army in the 1066 conquest of England, became Bishop of Rochester and remained active in helping William erect key buildings across England. Among his most notable contributions was construction of the White Tower at the Tower of London. Gundulf also helped design and build the keeps at Rochester and Colchester castles. This demonstrates how religious and secular architectural expertise overlapped, with church officials bringing specialized knowledge to castle construction projects. The evolution of castle design reflects continuous innovation by medieval builders responding to changing military, social, and aesthetic requirements. During later medieval periods, skilled architects came to be valued significantly, some being hired directly by monarchs to design their castles. While early medieval castle architects specialized in Romanesque traditions, later architects became skilled in Gothic architecture while applying innovations of their own. This architectural evolution shows how castle builders continuously refined techniques and incorporated new ideas from various sources. Regional variations in castle construction reflect adaptation of building techniques to local conditions, available materials, and cultural preferences. Master James of St. George's international work across Switzerland, France, Italy, Wales, and Scotland demonstrates how the best medieval builders combined technical expertise with cultural sensitivity. Architectural historians recognize James's brilliance in his ability to realize his patrons' architectural preferences while balancing them with broad knowledge of military engineering, revealing exceptional capacities as both architect and project organizer. The international nature of master mason work meant that skilled professionals moved between different kingdoms and regions to undertake major construction projects. James's journey from Savoy to Wales demonstrates how technical expertise transcended political boundaries in medieval Europe. The best castle builders were sought after across the continent, commanding high salaries and prestigious appointments that reflected their immense value to medieval rulers. Contemporary experimental archaeology provides invaluable insights into medieval construction methods and workforce organization. At Guédelon Castle in France, a team of 40 professional builders and craftspeople launched a project in 1998 with a straightforward mandate: build a 13th century castle using only 13th century tools, techniques, and materials. The project's 40 stonemasons, woodcutters, weavers, painters, blacksmiths, and other artisans draw inspiration from contemporaneous sites and texts. This modern project demonstrates that even with complete knowledge of medieval techniques, castle construction remains enormously complex and time-consuming, requiring diverse specialized skills. Workers at Guédelon face the same challenges medieval builders encountered: working with unpredictable materials, coordinating complex workflows, and maintaining quality standards using only hand tools and traditional techniques. The recognition of medieval construction expertise extends to modern preservation efforts. When Notre Dame Cathedral needed restoration after the 2019 fire, many involved in the rebuilding called to consult with Guédelon's talented medieval workers. This consultation demonstrates that medieval building techniques retain practical value and that understanding traditional construction methods remains relevant for preserving historical structures. The expertise developed through experimental archaeology helps bridge the gap between historical knowledge and practical application. By performing this labor, the traditional way, workers help those who study medieval castles understand more about how they were really built. This decades-long project helps train new workers, entertain visitors, and advance archaeological studies, with hundreds of thousands of people visiting each year to see craftspeople and artisans work on the building using historically accurate methods. The sophisticated knowledge required for medieval castle construction challenges common assumptions about medieval technical capabilities. These builders possessed deep understanding of structural engineering, materials science, project management, and logistics that enabled them to create structures of remarkable complexity and durability. Their achievements represent not primitive construction, but sophisticated adaptation of available technologies and techniques to create some of history's most impressive architectural monuments. The social hierarchy within castle construction sites was remarkably complex, creating a medieval version of corporate structure that would influence European society for centuries. At the very top of this pyramid sat the master mason, but beneath him existed multiple layers of authority and specialization that kept these massive projects functioning. Senior masons supervised different sections of construction, each responsible for specific areas like towers, walls, or gatehouses. These section leaders earned significantly more than ordinary craftsmen and often received additional privileges like better housing and food rations. Below the senior masons came the journeymen, skilled craftsmen who had completed their apprenticeships but hadn't yet achieved master status. These workers formed the core of the skilled workforce, handling the most technical aspects of construction that required years of training but didn't demand the leadership responsibilities of their superiors. Journeyman stonemasons could cut complex architectural elements, carve decorative features, and solve technical problems that arose during construction. The apprenticeship system that fed this hierarchy was surprisingly sophisticated, resembling modern vocational training programs in its structure and rigor. Young boys, typically starting around age 12 or 14, would be bound to master craftsmen for periods of 7 to 9 years. During this time, they received not just technical training, but also education in reading, basic mathematics, and the business aspects of their trade. Apprentices started with the most basic tasks like mixing mortar and carrying tools, gradually working their way up to more complex responsibilities as their skills developed. What made this system particularly effective was its emphasis on quality control and knowledge preservation. Master craftsmen had strong incentives to train apprentices properly because their own reputations depended on the quality of work produced by their teams. Guild regulations enforced standards and ensured that knowledge passed accurately from one generation to the next. This created a continuous improvement cycle where each generation of builders built upon the innovations and techniques of their predecessors. The international exchange of building knowledge was far more extensive than most people realize. Master builders regularly traveled between different kingdoms, bringing techniques and innovations across cultural and political boundaries. When a master mason worked on projects in multiple countries, he would adapt local building traditions to incorporate the best practices he had learned elsewhere. This cross-pollination of ideas led to rapid advancement in construction techniques and architectural styles throughout medieval Europe. Consider how this worked in practice. A master mason who had learned advanced stone-cutting techniques in France might bring those methods to England when recruited for a major castle project. He would train local craftsmen in these new techniques, permanently raising the skill level of English stoneworkers. When those English craftsmen later worked on other projects, they would spread these techniques further, creating a ripple effect of technological advancement across the continent. The financing mechanisms for castle construction reveal the enormous economic disruption these projects created throughout medieval society. Lords didn't just pay construction costs from their existing treasuries. They often borrowed heavily, sold lands, increased taxes on their tenants, and entered into complex financial arrangements with merchants and moneylenders. Some castle projects essentially bankrupted their builders, forcing them to abandon construction part-way through or complete their fortifications using cheaper materials and simpler designs than originally planned. The economic impact extended far beyond the immediate construction costs. Castle projects created boom economies in the surrounding regions, drawing workers, merchants, and suppliers from across the countryside. Temporary settlements often sprang up near major construction sites, housing the thousands of workers and their families. These construction camps required their own infrastructure, including housing, food supplies, workshops, and even entertainment facilities to keep workers satisfied during their long employment. Local economies were transformed by the massive demand for materials and services. Quarries that had operated on a small scale suddenly needed to increase production dramatically. Forests were cleared to provide timber for scaffolding, roofing, and interior construction. Iron production increased to meet demand for tools, hinges, locks, and reinforcements. The ripple effects touched every aspect of medieval economic life in regions where major castles were under construction. The transportation challenges involved in castle construction were staggering by medieval standards. Moving massive stones from quarries to construction sites required coordinated efforts involving hundreds of carts, boats, and pack animals. Roads had to be improved or built entirely new to handle the heavy traffic. Rivers might need to be dredged or diverted to allow boats carrying stone to reach inland construction sites. Bridges had to be reinforced or rebuilt to support the weight of loaded carts. The logistics of feeding thousands of workers presented another enormous challenge. Castle construction sites required continuous supplies of grain, meat, vegetables, and drink to keep their workforces functioning. This meant establishing supply lines stretching across multiple regions and maintaining relationships with dozens of suppliers. During harvest seasons, when agricultural workers returned to their farms, food supplies often became scarce and expensive, forcing construction managers to stockpile provisions or temporarily reduce their workforces. Weather played a crucial role in determining construction schedules and techniques. Stone cutting and laying had to be suspended during freezing weather because mortar wouldn't set properly in cold conditions. Heavy rains could flood excavations, damage stored materials, and make transportation impossible on muddy roads. Snow and ice made scaffolding dangerous and rendered many construction tasks impossible. Successful master builders had to plan their projects around these seasonal constraints, scheduling different types of work for different times of year. The development of specialized construction equipment represented major technological advances during the medieval period. The treadwheel crane, powered by workers walking inside a large wooden wheel, could lift stones weighing several tons to heights of over 100 feet. These machines required skilled operators who understood the mechanical principles involved and could coordinate complex lifting operations safely. Pulleys, winches, and lever systems were constantly being refined to handle heavier loads more efficiently. Scaffolding construction was itself a specialized skill requiring deep understanding of structural engineering principles. Medieval scaffolding had to support not just workers, but also heavy materials and construction equipment. The wooden frameworks had to be strong enough to bear enormous loads, while flexible enough to accommodate the natural settling that occurred as castle walls rose higher. Master carpenters, who specialized in scaffolding design, were highly valued members of construction teams. The precision required in medieval stone-cutting challenges modern assumptions about medieval craftsmanship. Stonemasons had to create blocks that fit together perfectly, often without the benefit of modern measuring tools or templates. Each stone had to be cut to exact specifications, accounting for the natural variations in the materials and the settling that would occur as construction progressed. The tolerances involved were often measured in fractions of inches, requiring extraordinary skill and experience to achieve consistently. Different types of stone required completely different cutting and handling techniques. Limestone could be carved, while relatively soft, but harden with exposure to air. Sandstone required different tools and techniques depending on its grain structure and mineral content. Granite was extremely difficult to work, but provided superior strength and durability. Master quarrymen had to understand the properties of each type of stone and adapt their techniques accordingly. The development of mortar represented a critical technological advancement that made large-scale stone construction possible. Medieval builders experimented with different combinations of lime, sand, and additives to create mortars suited to specific applications. Mortar used in foundations had to resist moisture and support enormous weights. Mortar used in walls had to bond strongly with stone, while remaining flexible enough to accommodate thermal expansion and structural settling. The chemistry involved was complex and required extensive practical knowledge to master. Quality control in medieval construction relied on the expertise and reputation of master craftsmen rather than written specifications or standardized testing. Master masons developed the ability to assess the quality of materials and workmanship through visual inspection, touch, and experience. They could identify substandard stone, poorly mixed mortar, or inadequate joinery techniques that might compromise the structural integrity of the finished castle. This knowledge was gained through years of experience and was one of the most valuable skills a master builder could possess. The role of women in castle construction was more significant than traditional histories often acknowledge. While most heavy construction work was performed by men, women played important roles in supporting the massive workforces involved in these projects. Women worked as cooks, brewers, seamstresses, and medical providers for construction crews. They also participated in some aspects of the building process itself, particularly in tasks related to interior finishing and decoration. Female workers were especially important in the production of textiles and furnishings needed to complete castle interiors. Tapestries, curtains, bedding, and clothing for castle residents were often produced by teams of women working on or near construction sites. These workers required high levels of skill and artistic ability, and their contributions were essential to creating the comfortable living spaces that made castles functional as residences, rather than just military fortifications. The training and career development of medieval construction workers followed patterns that would be recognizable in modern skilled trades. Successful apprentices became journeymen, earning steady wages while continuing to develop their skills. The most talented and ambitious journeymen eventually became masters themselves, taking on apprentices and building their own reputations. Some masters accumulated enough wealth and prestige to become major contractors, organizing and financing their own construction projects. Geographic specialization developed as certain regions became known for particular types of construction expertise. Areas with high-quality stone quarries naturally developed communities of skilled stoneworkers. Regions with abundant forests produced expert carpenters and timber framers. Coastal areas often specialized in the transportation and logistics aspects of large construction projects. This regional specialization created trade networks that connected construction projects across vast distances and facilitated the exchange of materials, workers, and techniques. The preservation of medieval construction knowledge depended heavily on oral tradition and hands-on training rather than written documentation. Master builders kept their most valuable techniques as trade secrets, passing them only to trusted apprentices and associates. This created both advantages and disadvantages for the advancement of construction technology. On one hand, it ensured that knowledge was thoroughly tested and refined through practical application. On the other hand, it made the knowledge vulnerable to loss when master builders died before fully training their successors. The political implications of castle construction extended far beyond their military functions. The ability to build impressive castles became a symbol of power and legitimacy for medieval rulers. Lords who could afford to construct elaborate fortifications demonstrated their wealth, technical sophistication, and commitment to defending their territories. The visual impact of a well-designed castle sent clear messages about the power and permanence of its builder's rule. International recruitment of master builders also served diplomatic functions, creating connections between different courts and kingdoms. When King Edward recruited Master James of St. George, he wasn't just hiring a skilled architect. He was establishing a relationship with the court of Savoy and demonstrating England's ability to attract the best talent from across Europe. These personal and professional connections often led to broader political and economic relationships between different regions. The legacy of medieval castle builders extended far beyond their immediate construction achievements. The techniques they developed influenced architectural development for centuries, contributing to the evolution of Gothic architecture, advances in structural engineering, and innovations in project management. Many of the organizational methods used to coordinate large construction projects were later adapted for other types of complex undertakings, including the construction of cathedrals, bridges, and early industrial facilities. Modern archaeological investigations continue to reveal new insights into medieval construction techniques and the lives of the people who built these remarkable structures. Excavations at castle sites often uncover evidence of the temporary structures that housed workers, the workshops where tools were made and maintained, and the systems used to transport and store materials. These discoveries help historians understand not just how castles were built, but also the social and economic impact of these massive construction projects on medieval communities. The technological innovations pioneered by medieval castle builders laid important groundwork for later architectural and engineering advances. Their experiments with different materials, structural techniques, and construction methods contributed to the gradual accumulation of knowledge that would eventually lead to the architectural achievements of the Renaissance and beyond. The problem-solving skills they developed in addressing the unique challenges of castle construction proved applicable to many other types of building projects. The complexity of medieval castle construction becomes even more fascinating when you examine the specialized knowledge required for different aspects of these projects. Take the art of stone selection, for instance. Master builders didn't just order stone from the nearest quarry and hope for the best. They understood that different types of stone had vastly different properties and applications. Limestone was prized for its workability when first quarried, but experienced builders knew it would harden significantly over time, making it ideal for structural elements that needed to cure in place. Sandstone presented its own unique challenges and opportunities. The finest sandstone could be carved with intricate detail, making it perfect for decorative elements like window tracery and sculptural features. But not all sandstone was created equal. Builders had to understand the geological formation of different quarries to predict how the stone would weather over time. Some sandstone crumbled within decades, while other varieties grew stronger with age as their internal structure crystallized. The most challenging material to work with was granite, which required completely different tools and techniques than softer stones. Granite quarrying was almost an art form in itself, requiring quarrymen who could read the natural fracture patterns in the rock and exploit them to extract usable blocks. The hardness that made granite so durable also made it incredibly difficult to shape and transport. Castles built with granite components often featured stones that had been roughly shaped at the quarry site to reduce the weight that needed to be transported. But stone selection was just the beginning of the material science knowledge that medieval builders possessed. They had to understand how different stones would interact with the mortars used to bind them together. Some stones absorbed moisture from mortar, weakening the bond. Others reacted chemically with lime mortar, creating stronger joints than either material could achieve alone. This knowledge was gained through generations of trial and error, with successful techniques being jealously guarded as trade secrets. The mortar itself represented one of the most sophisticated aspects of medieval construction technology. Creating effective lime mortar required precise control over the burning of limestone, the mixing of ingredients, and the application process. The limestone had to be heated to exactly the right temperature to drive off carbon dioxide and create quicklime. Too little heat, and the lime wouldn't be reactive enough. Too much heat, and the lime would become dead burned, essentially useless for construction purposes. Master builders developed techniques for testing mortar quality that were surprisingly sophisticated. They could assess the proper consistency by feel, determine the correct ratio of lime to sand for different applications, and predict how long the mortar would remain workable under various weather conditions. Some mortars were designed to set quickly for urgent repairs, while others were formulated to remain plastic for hours, allowing for complex stone-laying operations. The addition of various substances to mortar created specialized formulations for different purposes. Hair from animals was often mixed into mortar to provide tensile strength and prevent cracking. Crushed pottery, or tile, known as pozzolan, was added to create hydraulic mortar that could set underwater or in very damp conditions. Some builders experimented with organic additives like milk, eggs, or blood, though these were more common in specialized applications than in basic construction. Understanding the behavior of materials under different weather conditions was crucial for successful construction. Stone and mortar expand and contract at different rates as temperatures change, creating internal stresses that could crack walls or cause stones to work loose. Experienced builders learned to account for these thermal movements in their designs, creating expansion joints and using construction techniques that allowed structures to flex without failing. The seasonal timing of different construction activities was based on deep understanding of how materials behaved under various environmental conditions. Stone laying was typically suspended during the coldest months, not just because of worker comfort, but because mortar wouldn't cure properly in freezing temperatures. Spring construction often began with the preparation of materials that had been quarried and seasoned during the previous year. Summer presented its own challenges, particularly in regions with intense heat. Mortar could dry too quickly in hot weather, preventing proper bonding with stone surfaces. Builders developed techniques for keeping mortar workable in high temperatures, including the use of temporary shelters to shade work areas, and the scheduling of the most critical stone-laying operations for early morning or evening hours. The transportation of materials to construction sites required innovations in medieval engineering that rivaled the construction techniques themselves. Moving massive stone blocks from quarries to castle sites often involved building temporary roads, constructing bridges capable of supporting enormous loads, and developing specialized vehicles for heavy transport. The famous Caerphilly Castle in Wales required stones to be transported over 20 miles from quarries, necessitating the construction of an entirely new road system. Water transport was often preferred for moving the heaviest materials, leading to remarkable feats of medieval logistics. Boats were specially designed or modified to carry stone blocks weighing several tons. Rivers were sometimes dredged or dammed to create navigable channels that could reach inland construction sites. The coordination required to synchronize quarrying, transport, and construction schedules across such distances demanded project management skills that would challenge modern contractors. The development of lifting technology represented one of the most significant innovations in medieval construction. The treadwheel crane, which could lift stones weighing up to 5 tons to heights of over 100 feet, was a marvel of medieval engineering. These machines required teams of workers walking inside large wooden wheels, providing the power to operate complex systems of pulleys and gears. The precision required to position massive stones exactly where they needed to be was extraordinary. Operating these lifting machines safely required specialized knowledge and experience. Crane operators had to understand load limits, wind conditions, and the structural limitations of their equipment. A miscalculation could result in catastrophic accidents that would kill workers and damage months of construction progress. The most skilled crane operators were highly valued members of construction teams, often earning wages comparable to master craftsmen. The scaffolding systems used in medieval construction were engineering marvels in their own right. These temporary wooden structures had to support not just workers, but also heavy materials and construction equipment, while providing safe access to work areas hundreds of feet above the ground. Master carpenters who specialized in scaffolding design understood complex principles of structural engineering, creating frameworks that could adapt to the changing geometry of rising castle walls. Different types of scaffolding were developed for different construction phases and building geometries. Simple ladder scaffolds might suffice for low wall construction, but tall towers required sophisticated systems of platforms, braces, and supports that could be extended upward as construction progressed. Some scaffolding systems were designed to be partially dismantled and rebuilt at higher levels, while others were built to remain in place until construction was complete. The safety considerations involved in medieval construction were more sophisticated than often assumed. While workplace safety wasn't regulated by law as it is today, master builders had strong economic incentives to prevent accidents that would injure skilled workers and delay construction. Experienced builders developed safety protocols for working at height, handling heavy materials, and operating dangerous equipment. These practices were passed down through the apprenticeship system and became part of the accumulated wisdom of the construction trades. The interior finishing of castles required yet another set of specialized skills and trades. Plasterers created smooth wall surfaces using techniques that varied by region and available materials. Some plasters were purely functional, providing weather protection and smooth surfaces for painting. Others were decorative, incorporating complex molded patterns and textures that required years of training to master properly. Painters and decorators brought artistic skills to castle construction that transformed austere stone structures into impressive displays of wealth and power. Wall paintings weren't just decorative, but often served important functions, including the depiction of religious scenes, historical events, or heraldic symbols that reinforce the political and spiritual authority of the castle's owner. The pigments used in these paintings were often imported from distant regions, adding significant costs to construction projects. The installation of windows represented one of the most technically challenging aspects of castle finishing. Medieval window glass was expensive and difficult to work with, requiring specialized glaziers who understood both the technical and artistic aspects of their craft. The lead cane used to hold glass panels together had to be carefully shaped and soldered to create weatherproof seals while supporting the weight of the glass against wind loads. Metalworkers provided essential components that made castles functional as both fortifications and residences. Blacksmiths forged not just basic hardware like hinges and locks, but also complex mechanisms for drawbridges, portcullises, and other defensive features. The precision required to create these mechanisms using only hand tools and basic furnaces was extraordinary, requiring metalworkers who understood both mechanical principles and the properties of different metals. The creation of decorative ironwork added another layer of complexity to metalworking operations. Ornamental hinges, door handles, and window grills were often elaborate works of art that required master blacksmiths with both technical skill and artistic vision. These decorative elements weren't just ornamental, but served important functions in reinforcing doors, windows, and other vulnerable points in castle defenses. The coordination of all these different trades and specialties required management skills that were remarkable for any era. Master builders had to schedule the work of dozens of different craft specialties, ensuring that each trade could complete its work without interfering with others. Plasterers couldn't begin their work until masons had completed walls to the proper height. Glaziers couldn't install windows until carpenters had completed window frames. Painters couldn't decorate walls until plasterers had finished their work. The procurement of materials from multiple suppliers across vast distances required sophisticated understanding of medieval commerce and transportation networks. Master builders had to negotiate contracts with quarry owners, arrange transportation, coordinate delivery schedules, and manage inventory to ensure that materials arrived when needed without overwhelming storage capacity at construction sites. This required knowledge of seasonal variations in transportation costs, regional differences in material quality, and the reliability of different suppliers. Quality control throughout these massive projects relied heavily on the expertise and reputation of individual craftsmen rather than formal inspection systems. Master builders developed the ability to assess work quality through visual inspection and testing methods that were passed down through generations of experience. They could identify structural problems, material defects, or workmanship issues that might compromise the finished castle's integrity or longevity. The resolution of technical problems that arose during construction required creative problem-solving skills and deep understanding of structural principles. When unexpected soil conditions were encountered during foundation excavation, master builders had to redesign foundation systems on the spot. When stone deliveries were delayed or materials proved unsuitable, alternative solutions had to be devised quickly to prevent costly construction delays. Weather damage to work in progress required constant vigilance and rapid response capabilities. Sudden storms could damage partially completed walls, flood excavations, or destroy stored materials. Master builders had to maintain stockpiles of materials and maintain crews capable of rapid repairs to minimize the impact of weather-related setbacks on construction schedules and budgets. The integration of defensive features with residential amenities required master builders to balance competing requirements in their designs. Thick walls necessary for defense created challenges for lighting and ventilation in interior spaces. Arrow loops had to be positioned to provide effective fields of fire while minimizing vulnerabilities to enemy attack. Gatehouses had to accommodate both defensive requirements and the daily traffic of residents, servants, and visitors. The evolution of military technology during the medieval period forced constant adaptation in castle design and construction techniques. The development of more powerful siege engines required thicker walls and more sophisticated defensive features. The introduction of gunpowder weapons eventually made traditional castle fortifications obsolete, but during the height of castle construction, builders had to stay current with the latest developments in siege warfare to ensure their fortifications remained effective. The social dynamics within construction sites created complex relationships between workers of different skill levels and social backgrounds. Skilled craftsmen often jealously guarded their knowledge and techniques, creating tensions with apprentices eager to advance and labourers hoping to learn more valuable skills. Master builders had to manage these relationships carefully to maintain productivity and prevent conflicts that could disrupt construction progress. The temporary communities that grew up around major construction sites developed their own social structures and governance systems. With thousands of workers, their families, and supporting merchants and craftspeople living in close proximity for years, these construction camps required organisation and leadership to prevent chaos and maintain order. Master builders often found themselves serving as community leaders as well as construction managers. The economic impact of castle construction on surrounding regions could be transformative, creating new opportunities for local craftsmen while also disrupting traditional economic patterns. Local stone quarries might be overwhelmed by demand, forcing the development of new extraction sites and transportation networks. Forests might be clear-cut to provide timber, permanently altering local landscapes and economies. The knowledge and techniques developed through castle construction had lasting impact far beyond the completion of individual projects. Master builders and craftsmen carried their experience to other construction projects, spreading innovations in technique and design across Europe. The organizational methods developed for managing large construction projects influenced other types of complex undertakings, contributing to the gradual development of more sophisticated project management capabilities throughout medieval society. The testing and verification of construction techniques during medieval castle building reveals a sophisticated understanding of engineering principles that challenges modern assumptions about medieval technical knowledge. Master builders didn't just follow traditional methods blindly. They constantly experimented with new approaches, tested different materials, and refined their techniques based on practical results. When a particular mortar mixture proved more durable than others, or when a specific stone-cutting technique produced better results, this knowledge was carefully documented in the minds of master craftsmen and passed down through their networks. The development of specialized tools for different construction tasks represents another overlooked aspect of medieval building sophistication. Stonemasons used dozens of different chisels, each designed for specific types of cuts or stone textures. Flat chisels for smooth surfaces, pointed chisels for rough shaping, toothed chisels for creating textured finishes. The metallurgy required to create tools that could withstand the constant impact of stone cutting was itself a specialized craft requiring deep understanding of steel composition and heat treatment. Carpenters working on castle projects used toolkits that would be recognizable to modern woodworkers, though the precision achieved with hand tools alone was extraordinary. Mortise and tenon joints had to fit together perfectly to create strong connections in roof structures and interior frameworks. The wooden scaffolding systems that enabled high-altitude construction required joints that could bear enormous loads while remaining easy to assemble and dismantle as construction progressed. The mathematical knowledge required for castle construction was far more advanced than most people realize. Master builders had to calculate load-bearing requirements for walls of varying heights and thicknesses. They needed to determine the proper angles for defensive features like arrow loops and the optimal spacing for structural elements like buttresses. While they didn't use modern mathematical notation, their practical understanding of geometry and structural mechanics was sophisticated and effective. Surveying and site layout required techniques that ensured castle walls would be straight, corners would be square, and foundations would be level across irregular terrain. Master builders used simple but effective tools like the A-frame level, essentially a triangular wooden frame with a plumb bob suspended from the apex. By moving this device across a construction site, they could establish level reference points and create the precise layouts needed for complex architectural features. The understanding of soil mechanics and foundation engineering demonstrated by medieval builders was remarkable given their limited tools for soil testing. They learned to read landscape features and vegetation patterns to identify suitable foundation conditions. Areas with certain types of trees or rock outcroppings indicated stable soil, while marshy areas or locations with specific plant communities suggested potential foundation problems. When unsuitable soil conditions were encountered, medieval builders developed ingenious solutions. Driven wooden piles could extend foundations down to more stable soil layers. Stone platforms could distribute loads across wider areas of soft ground. Some castles were built on artificial islands created by dumping enormous quantities of stone and earth into marshy areas, creating stable building platforms where none existed naturally. The drainage systems incorporated into castle designs reveal sophisticated understanding of water management and its impact on structural integrity. Underground drainage channels diverted water away from foundations. Gutters and downspouts controlled rainwater runoff from roofs and walls. Some castles included elaborate systems of drains and sewers that managed both stormwater and waste disposal while maintaining defensive security. Water supply systems represented another area where medieval builders demonstrated remarkable technical expertise. Wells had to be dug deep enough to reach reliable water sources while remaining defensible against siege tactics like poisoning or diversion. Some castles included elaborate cisterns that collected and stored rainwater, complete with filtration systems using sand and charcoal to maintain water quality during extended sieges. The heating systems designed for medieval castles balanced comfort requirements with defensive necessities and fire safety concerns. Fireplaces had to provide adequate heat for large stone rooms while minimizing smoke and fire hazards. Chimneys required careful design to create proper draft while avoiding weak points in defensive walls. Some advanced castles included hypercaust systems adapted from Roman techniques, using heated air circulated through wall cavities to warm entire rooms. Kitchen facilities in major castles were essentially industrial food production operations, requiring specialized design and construction. Multiple hearths for different types of cooking, storage areas for various foodstuffs, preparation spaces for different kitchen activities. The ventilation systems needed to remove smoke and cooking odors while maintaining defensive security. Water systems had to supply large quantities for cooking and cleaning, while drainage systems handled waste disposal. The integration of defensive features with daily living requirements created unique architectural challenges that medieval builders solved with remarkable creativity. Murder holes in gatehouse ceilings had to be positioned to defend against attackers while allowing normal traffic flow. Arrow loops required precise angles to provide defensive coverage without creating weak points in walls. Drawbridge mechanisms had to be reliable and quick to operate while remaining secure against enemy tampering. Storage facilities within castles had to accommodate the enormous quantities of supplies needed to sustain large households and garrisons during peacetime and siege conditions. Granaries required careful design to prevent spoilage from moisture and pests, while remaining accessible for daily use. Armories had to protect weapons and armor from rust, while allowing quick access during emergencies. Stables had to house dozens of horses with their feed and equipment while maintaining sanitation and fire safety. The acoustic properties of castle architecture were carefully considered by medieval builders, though this aspect of their expertise is rarely discussed. Great halls were designed with vaulted ceilings and specific proportions that enhanced speech and music for ceremonial functions. Guard chambers were positioned to maximize the ability to hear approaching threats. Even the positioning of doors and windows took into account how sound would travel through different parts of the castle structure. Lighting systems in medieval castles required balancing functional needs with defensive security and fire safety concerns. Windows had to admit sufficient daylight for daily activities while minimizing vulnerabilities to enemy attack. Torch holders and candle sconces were positioned to provide adequate illumination while preventing accidental fires. Some castles included innovative light wells or reflective surfaces that maximized the effectiveness of available natural light. The preservation techniques used to protect construction materials during the building process demonstrate medieval understanding of material science and environmental factors. Stone blocks were often covered with straw or wooden shelters to prevent frost damage during winter storage. Timber was seasoned using controlled drying techniques that prevented warping and cracking. Iron components were protected from rust using various coatings and storage methods. Quality assurance during construction relied on the accumulated experience and professional reputation of master craftsmen rather than formal testing protocols. Master builders could assess the structural soundness of walls by observing how they settled during construction. They could identify potential problems with mortar by examining its color, texture, and curing behavior. Stone quality was evaluated through visual inspection, sound tests, and knowledge of quarry characteristics. The training programs for specialized construction workers were more comprehensive than simple apprenticeships. Young men learning stone cutting didn't just practice basic techniques, but studied the properties of different stone types, learned to read architectural drawings, and understood how their work fit into larger construction projects. This broad education produced craftsmen who could adapt to changing requirements and solve problems independently. The documentation systems used during major construction projects, while not extensive by modern standards, were more sophisticated than often assumed. Master builders maintained records of material deliveries, worker payments, and construction progress. These records helped coordinate complex logistics and provided accountability for the enormous sums of money involved in castle construction. Some of these medieval construction records survive today, providing invaluable insights into building practices and costs. The international exchange of construction knowledge created networks of professional relationships that spanned the medieval world. Master builders corresponded with colleagues in other regions, sharing innovations and techniques. Skilled craftsmen traveled between projects, carrying knowledge of new methods and materials to different construction sites. This professional networking accelerated the development and spread of improved building techniques across Europe. The environmental considerations incorporated into castle design reveal medieval understanding of climate, weather patterns, and natural hazards. Sites were chosen to take advantage of prevailing wind patterns for ventilation, while avoiding exposure to severe storms. Building orientations maximized solar heating in winter while providing shade in summer. Drainage systems were designed to handle the heaviest expected rainfall, while foundation systems accounted for soil conditions during different seasons. The economic multiplier effects of castle construction created lasting changes in regional economies that extended far beyond the completion of building projects. Improved roads built to transport construction materials remained useful for commerce long after castles were finished. Skilled workers trained during construction projects often remained in the region, establishing workshops and training local apprentices. The temporary infrastructure created to support construction often became permanent features of local economic development. The technological innovations pioneered during castle construction found applications in many other types of building projects. Lifting devices developed for moving heavy stones were adapted for cathedral construction and bridge building. Surveying techniques refined for castle layout were used for town planning and road construction. The organizational methods developed for managing large construction workforces influenced other complex medieval undertakings, from mining operations to military campaigns. The social mobility opportunities created by castle construction provided pathways for advancement that were rare in medieval society. Talented apprentices could rise to become master craftsmen, earning substantial incomes and social recognition. Some master builders accumulated enough wealth and influence to become significant landowners themselves. The skills and connections gained through work on major construction projects opened doors to opportunities throughout the medieval world. The cultural impact of castle construction extended far beyond their military and residential functions. These massive building projects became symbols of technological achievement and artistic accomplishment that inspired pride and admiration throughout medieval society. The techniques and artistic traditions developed during castle construction influenced architectural development for centuries, contributing to the evolution of Gothic style and the eventual Renaissance revival of classical principles. The preservation of medieval construction knowledge through practical application, rather than written documentation, created both strengths and vulnerabilities in technological development. On one hand, techniques that survived were thoroughly tested and refined through generations of use. On the other hand, valuable knowledge could be lost when experienced craftsmen died before fully training their successors, or when economic disruptions interrupted the normal apprenticeship cycles. The adaptation of construction techniques to local conditions and available resources demonstrates the flexibility and problem-solving capabilities of medieval builders. In regions with abundant timber, wooden elements were emphasized even in stone castles. Areas with particular types of stone developed specialized cutting and laying techniques optimized for local materials. Coastal regions incorporated materials and methods adapted to marine environments and salt air corrosion. The maintenance and repair systems incorporated into castle design reveal long-term thinking about structural durability and operational requirements. Provision was made for accessing all major structural elements for inspection and repair. Materials and tools needed for routine maintenance were stockpiled within castle walls. Drainage systems included access points for cleaning and repair. Even during initial construction, builders considered how different elements would age and what maintenance they would require. The integration of artistic and decorative elements into castle construction required coordination between functional builders and specialized artists. Stone carvers created elaborate capitals, corbels, and decorative moldings that enhanced the architectural beauty of castles while serving structural functions. Master masons had to plan their work to accommodate these artistic elements, ensuring that decorative features were properly integrated into load-bearing structures. The development of regional building styles reflected the adaptation of general construction principles to local traditions, materials, and defensive requirements. Welsh castles incorporated lessons learned from conflicts with English forces while adapting to mountainous terrain and local stone types. Scottish castles developed distinctive features suited to different climate conditions and military threats. Continental European castles reflected influences from different architectural traditions and available technologies. The legacy of medieval castle construction knowledge influenced architectural and engineering development far beyond the medieval period itself. Renaissance architects studied surviving castles to understand structural principles and construction techniques. Early modern military engineers adapted castle design concepts for artillery fortifications. The organizational methods developed for managing medieval construction projects influenced the development of modern project management techniques and construction industry practices. The complexity of managing these massive construction projects becomes even more fascinating when you consider the communication challenges medieval builders faced. Without telephones, email, or even reliable postal systems, coordinating the work of thousands of people spread across multiple sites required ingenious solutions. Master builders developed elaborate systems of written instructions, standardized symbols, and messenger networks to keep their projects running smoothly. Consider the challenge of coordinating stone deliveries from multiple quarries located dozens of miles apart. Each quarry produced stone with slightly different characteristics, and the master builder had to ensure that the right type of stone arrived at the construction site exactly when it was needed. Too early, and valuable storage space would be overwhelmed. Too late, and hundreds of workers would be left idle, costing enormous sums in wasted wages. The communication system relied heavily on trusted messengers who carried detailed instructions between different parts of the construction operation. These messengers had to understand enough about construction processes to answer questions and make minor decisions when circumstances changed. Some became so knowledgeable about building operations that they essentially functioned as assistant project managers, coordinating activities across multiple locations. Written instructions were often accompanied by detailed drawings and templates that could be used to ensure consistency across different work crews. Stonemasons working at quarries received precise specifications for the blocks they needed to cut. Carpenters received patterns for the wooden components they needed to create. These standardized specifications helped ensure that pieces created at different locations would fit together properly when assembled at the construction site. The development of these communication and coordination systems represented a major advance in medieval project management capabilities. The techniques pioneered by castle builders were later adapted for other complex undertakings, including cathedral construction, bridge building, and large-scale agricultural projects. The organizational principles they developed influenced the evolution of medieval administration and contributed to the growing sophistication of European governments and institutions. The training programs for construction supervisors and managers were as important as the technical training provided to craftsmen. Future master builders had to learn not just construction techniques, but also project management, personnel administration, and financial control. They studied under experienced masters for years, gradually taking on greater responsibilities as they demonstrated their capabilities. This management training often involved rotation through different types of construction projects to provide broad experience with various building techniques and challenges. A future master builder might work on castle construction for several years, then spend time on cathedral projects to learn different architectural principles, followed by experience with bridge construction to understand the unique challenges of building over water. The financial management skills required for major construction projects were extraordinary by medieval standards. Master builders had to track expenses for thousands of workers, coordinate payments to dozens of suppliers, and manage budgets that represented the equivalent of modern multi-million-dollar projects. They developed sophisticated accounting systems that tracked costs by category and provided regular reports to their noble patrons. Budget overruns were a constant concern, and experienced master builders learned to build contingencies into their estimates to account for unexpected problems and changing requirements. Weather delays, material quality issues, and design changes could quickly escalate costs beyond original projections. The most successful builders developed reputations for delivering projects on time and within budget, making them highly sought after for future commissions. The procurement strategies used for major construction projects reveal sophisticated understanding of medieval markets and supply chains. Master builders had to evaluate multiple suppliers for each type of material, considering not just price, but also quality, reliability, and delivery capabilities. They often negotiated long-term contracts that guaranteed supply at fixed prices, protecting their projects from market fluctuations. Risk management in medieval construction required constant attention to factors that could disrupt progress or threaten worker safety. Weather was always a primary concern, but builders also had to consider political instability, bandit attacks on supply convoys, disease outbreaks among workers, and conflicts with local populations who might resent the disruption caused by major construction projects. Contingency planning involved maintaining alternative supply sources, keeping reserve funds available for emergency expenses, and developing backup plans for critical construction phases. Experienced builders learned to identify potential problems early and take preventive action before minor issues became major crises that could derail entire projects. The seasonal rhythms of medieval construction created complex scheduling challenges that required careful coordination of different work activities. Stone cutting and laying had to be completed during warmer months when mortar would cure properly. Timber harvesting was typically done in winter when sap was down and wood would season better. Quarrying operations were often suspended during the wettest months when extraction became difficult or impossible. These seasonal constraints meant that master builders had to plan their projects years in advance, scheduling different types of work for optimal times, while ensuring that completed work would be protected during inactive periods. Temporary roofs might be erected to protect partially completed walls during winter. Stone blocks would be cut and stockpiled during favourable weather for use during the next building season. The coordination of different craft specialties required deep understanding of how various types of work interfaced with each other. Masons couldn't begin laying stones until foundation work was complete and properly cured. Carpenters couldn't install roof structures until walls had reached the proper height. Plasterers couldn't begin their work until masonry and carpentry were finished in each area. Master builders developed detailed scheduling systems that mapped out the sequence of work activities and identified critical dependencies between different trades. They had to balance the desire to keep all workers busy with the practical limitations of workspace and material availability. Too many workers in one area created congestion and safety hazards. Too few workers on critical path activities could delay the entire project. The quality control systems used in medieval construction relied heavily on the professional reputation and personal integrity of individual craftsmen. Master builders developed relationships with trusted suppliers and subcontractors whose work they could rely on without constant supervision. These professional networks often spanned multiple regions and provided access to specialized skills and materials that weren't available locally. Inspection procedures were built into the construction process at critical stages where problems could be identified and corrected before they compromised later work. Foundation inspections ensured that base structures were solid and properly aligned. Wall inspections checked for proper stone placement and mortar quality. Roof inspections verified that structural elements were properly connected and weatherproofed. The documentation systems maintained during construction provided accountability and helped resolve disputes over payments, specifications, and work quality. Master builders kept detailed records of material deliveries, work progress, and payments made to workers and suppliers. These records were often audited by representatives of the noble patrons who were financing the projects. Contract negotiations for major construction projects involved complex agreements that specified not just the scope of work and payment terms, but also quality standards, delivery schedules, and procedures for handling changes or problems. Master builders had to protect themselves against unfair contract terms while providing sufficient guarantees to satisfy their patrons' concerns about project completion. The legal framework governing construction contracts varied by region, but generally provided mechanisms for resolving disputes and enforcing agreements. Guild regulations often specified standards for different types of work and provided arbitration procedures when conflicts arose between builders and their clients. These legal protections encouraged investment in major construction projects by reducing the risks faced by both builders and patrons. The insurance concepts used in medieval construction were primitive by modern standards, but provided some protection against major losses. Wealthy patrons might diversify their risks by funding multiple smaller projects rather than concentrating all their resources in single massive undertakings. Builders often form partnerships that spread financial risks among multiple participants. The financing mechanisms used for castle construction reveal the enormous economic commitment these projects required. Many lords had to mortgage lands, borrow from merchants, or enter into complex financial arrangements to fund their building ambitions. Some projects were financed through special taxes levied on tenants or through the sale of privileges and rights to raise revenue. The economic impact of construction delays could be devastating for both builders and patrons. Every month of delay meant continued wage payments to workers, additional costs for material storage and security, and lost opportunity for the castle to begin providing its intended military and residential functions. Master builders who developed reputations for timely project completion commanded premium wages and had their choice of prestigious commissions. The technology transfer that occurred during major construction projects helped spread advanced building techniques across medieval Europe. When master builders recruited workers from different regions, they often brought together craftsmen with diverse skills and knowledge. This mixing of techniques and traditions led to rapid innovation and improvement in construction methods. The standardization of construction techniques and terminology that developed during the medieval period facilitated communication and cooperation between builders from different regions. Common terms for tools, materials, and procedures allowed craftsmen to work effectively on projects far from their home regions. Standardized measurement systems ensured that components created in different locations would fit together properly. The professional associations and guild systems that developed around construction trades provided training standards, quality control, and mutual support for builders and craftsmen. These organizations helped preserve and transmit technical knowledge while protecting the economic interests of their members. Guild regulations often specified training requirements, work standards, and pricing guidelines that maintained professional standards across the industry. The international reputation of master builders created a competitive market for construction expertise that drove continuous improvement in building techniques and project management capabilities. Builders who could demonstrate superior results commanded higher wages and more prestigious commissions. This competition encouraged innovation and helped spread the best practices throughout the construction industry. The cultural exchange that occurred during major construction projects brought together people from different regions, social classes, and ethnic backgrounds in ways that were unusual for medieval society. Castle construction sites became melting pots where different traditions, languages, and customs interacted. These cultural exchanges often had lasting impacts on local communities and contributed to the gradual integration of medieval European society. The artistic traditions that developed during castle construction influenced architectural styles and decorative techniques for centuries. Master craftsmen developed distinctive regional styles that combined functional requirements with aesthetic preferences. The sculptural and decorative elements created for castles established artistic traditions that influenced later architectural development throughout Europe. The technological innovations pioneered during castle construction found applications in many other areas of medieval life. Lifting devices developed for moving heavy stones were adapted for other construction projects and industrial applications. Surveying techniques were used for land management and agricultural development. The organizational methods developed for managing large workforces influenced military organization and other complex undertakings. The educational impact of castle construction provided training opportunities that wouldn't have been available otherwise in medieval society. Young people could learn valuable skills while earning wages that supported their families. The knowledge and experience gained during these projects often provided foundation for successful careers in construction and related fields. The social mobility opportunities created by castle construction allowed talented individuals to advance beyond the circumstances of their birth. Skilled craftsmen could accumulate enough wealth to establish their own workshops and train apprentices. Some master builders became wealthy enough to purchase land and achieve noble status themselves. The urban development that often accompanied major castle construction projects created new economic centers that continued to grow long after construction was complete. Towns that developed to support castle construction often became permanent commercial centers with diverse economies. The infrastructure created for construction projects, including roads, bridges, and harbors, provided lasting benefits to regional development. The environmental modifications made during castle construction permanently altered local landscapes in ways that are still visible today. Quarries created during construction became landscape features that influenced later development patterns. The transportation networks built to support construction projects often became permanent trade routes that shaped regional economic development for centuries. The preservation of construction knowledge through practical application, rather than written documentation, created both advantages and challenges for technological development. Techniques that survived were thoroughly tested and refined through generations of use, but valuable knowledge could be lost when experienced practitioners died without fully training successors. This practical approach to knowledge preservation influenced the development of European craft traditions and educational systems. The adaptation of construction techniques to local conditions and available resources demonstrates the flexibility and problem-solving capabilities of medieval builders. Regional variations in building styles reflected not just aesthetic preferences, but also practical adaptations to climate, available materials, and local defensive requirements. These regional adaptations contributed to the rich diversity of medieval architecture that continues to fascinate modern observers. The maintenance and repair systems incorporated into castle design reveal long-term thinking about structural durability and operational requirements. Medieval builders understood that their constructions would need ongoing maintenance and planned accordingly. Access routes for repair work, storage spaces for maintenance materials, and replacement systems for structural elements were all considered during initial construction. The integration of defensive and residential functions in castle design required careful balancing of competing requirements that challenged even the most experienced builders. Thick walls necessary for defense created problems for lighting and ventilation in living spaces. Security requirements conflicted with the need for convenient access and comfortable accommodations. Successful castle designs achieved elegant solutions to these competing demands. The evolution of construction techniques during the medieval period reflects continuous innovation and adaptation to changing requirements and available technologies. Early castle builders working with primitive tools and limited knowledge gradually developed more sophisticated techniques and capabilities. This technological evolution was driven by practical experience, competition between builders, and the exchange of knowledge across regional and cultural boundaries. The legacy of medieval castle construction extends far beyond the impressive structures that still dot the European landscape. The organizational methods, technical innovations, and professional traditions developed during this period influenced architectural and engineering development for centuries. Modern construction practices, project management techniques, and professional education systems all trace their roots back to innovations pioneered by medieval castle builders. The international scope of castle construction created networks of professional relationships and knowledge exchange that transcended political boundaries and cultural differences. Master builders who worked in multiple countries brought together diverse traditions and techniques, accelerating technological development and cultural exchange throughout medieval Europe. These professional networks contributed to the gradual integration of European society and the development of shared cultural and technical traditions. The economic impact of castle construction on medieval society was profound and lasting. These projects mobilized enormous human and material resources, created new technologies and industries, and established trade networks that continued to operate long after construction was complete. The wealth generated by construction activity supported the development of sophisticated urban economies and contributed to the gradual transformation of European society from a primarily agricultural to a more diverse economic base. The social changes brought about by castle construction included new opportunities for education and advancement, the development of professional classes, and the creation of more complex social structures. The skills and knowledge required for these massive projects encouraged literacy, numeracy, and technical education that benefited society far beyond the construction industry itself. The cultural significance of castles in medieval society extended far beyond their practical functions as military fortifications and noble residences. These impressive structures served as symbols of power, stability, and technological achievement that inspired pride and confidence throughout medieval communities. The artistic and architectural traditions developed during castle construction influenced cultural development for centuries and continue to shape our understanding of medieval civilization. The preservation of medieval construction knowledge through experimental archaeology projects like Guédelon Castle provides valuable insights into historical building techniques and the lives of the people who created these remarkable structures. These modern projects help bridge the gap between historical documentation and practical understanding, allowing us to appreciate the true complexity and sophistication of medieval construction achievements. The recognition of medieval builders as skilled professionals, rather than anonymous labourers, reflects growing understanding of the complexity and sophistication of medieval society. These men and women possessed advanced technical knowledge, organisational capabilities, and artistic vision that enabled them to create some of history's most impressive architectural achievements. Their legacy continues to inspire and inform modern construction practices, demonstrating the enduring value of their innovations and expertise. The international collaboration required for major castle construction projects created precedents for the kind of complex international undertakings that characterize modern global society. The ability to coordinate resources, expertise, and labor across political and cultural boundaries was a remarkable achievement that anticipated many features of contemporary international commerce and cooperation. The development of construction standards during the medieval period reveals how builders transformed chaotic building sites into highly organized operations that could function effectively for decades, without modern safety regulations or workplace standards. Master builders had to develop their own systems for protecting workers and ensuring quality output. These informal standards became so effective that they were gradually adopted across the construction industry throughout Europe. Worker safety protocols evolved from hard-won experience with the dangers inherent in castle construction. Falls from scaffolding, injuries from falling stones, and accidents with lifting equipment were constant threats that could kill experienced craftsmen and cripple construction progress. Master builders learned to implement safety measures that protected their valuable workers while maintaining productivity. These measures included mandatory rest periods for workers operating dangerous equipment, safety inspections of scaffolding and lifting devices, and protocols for working in hazardous weather conditions. The development of safety equipment using medieval technology was surprisingly sophisticated. Leather harnesses were developed for workers who had to work at extreme heights. Wooden safety barriers were installed around scaffolding platforms and lift areas. Warning systems using horns or bells alerted workers to dangerous operations like the movement of heavy stones overhead. These safety innovations weren't mandated by law, but emerged from the practical necessity of keeping skilled workers alive and productive. Training programs for hazardous work activities became formalized parts of apprenticeship systems. Young workers weren't allowed to operate lifting equipment or work at dangerous heights until they had demonstrated competence with safer tasks. Experienced workers were assigned as mentors for apprentices working in hazardous conditions. These training systems reduced accident rates while ensuring that safety knowledge was passed down through generations of construction workers. The medical care systems established at major construction sites were more advanced than typical medieval healthcare. Castle construction projects often employed dedicated medical personnel who specialized in treating construction injuries. These medical practitioners developed expertise in treating fractures, cuts, and other injuries common on building sites. They maintained stocks of medical supplies and developed treatment protocols specifically designed for construction-related injuries. Emergency response procedures for serious accidents were carefully planned and regularly practiced. Workers were trained to respond quickly to accidents involving falls or crushing injuries. Rescue equipment was positioned strategically around construction sites to enable rapid response to emergencies. These emergency procedures often meant the difference between life and death for workers injured in construction accidents. The psychological support systems that developed around construction communities addressed the mental health challenges of dangerous long-term work projects. Workers faced constant stress from dangerous working conditions, separation from families, and the physical demands of heavy construction work. Informal support networks developed among workers who shared similar risks and challenges. Religious services and community activities helped maintain morale during long construction projects. Compensation systems for injured workers provided some protection against the economic devastation that could result from construction accidents. While medieval society didn't have formal worker compensation programs, responsible master builders often continued to provide support for workers who were injured on the job. This support might include continued wages during recovery periods, assistance with medical expenses, or help finding alternative employment for workers who couldn't return to construction work. The reputation systems that governed relationships between builders and workers created incentives for maintaining good working conditions and fair treatment. Master builders who developed reputations for treating workers poorly found it difficult to recruit skilled craftsmen for their projects. Conversely, builders known for fair treatment and good working conditions could attract the best workers and complete projects more efficiently. These reputation effects created market-based incentives for good labor practices. The seasonal employment patterns of medieval construction created unique challenges for maintaining stable workforces. Many skilled workers returned to agricultural activities during planting and harvest seasons, creating predictable labor shortages that builders had to plan around. Some builders developed strategies for retaining key workers year-round by providing alternative employment during construction off-seasons. Others established relationships with specific groups of seasonal workers who would return reliably when construction resumed. The housing and living arrangements for construction workers evolved into sophisticated temporary communities that provided reasonable comfort and security for workers and their families. Large construction projects often included purpose-built housing for workers, complete with communal kitchens, workshops for tool maintenance and repair, and recreational facilities. These construction villages had to be planned and managed carefully to prevent overcrowding, maintain sanitation, and provide security for valuable tools and materials. Food supply systems for construction workforces required careful planning and substantial resources. Feeding thousands of workers required establishing relationships with agricultural producers across wide regions, maintaining food storage facilities, and coordinating delivery schedules. The nutritional requirements of workers performing heavy physical labor were substantial, and inadequate food supplies could quickly undermine productivity and morale. Some construction projects established their own agricultural operations to ensure reliable food supplies. Clothing and equipment provision for construction workers was another major logistical challenge. Workers needed specialized clothing and protective equipment for different types of construction tasks. Stonemasons required leather aprons and gloves to protect against sharp stone edges. Workers operating lifting equipment needed sturdy footwear with good traction. Carpenters needed tool belts and protective clothing suitable for working with wood and metal tools. Providing and maintaining this equipment required substantial resources and careful planning. Tool manufacturing and maintenance operations at construction sites were essential for keeping work progressing efficiently. Construction projects required thousands of specialized tools that had to be manufactured, maintained, and replaced regularly. Blacksmith shops at construction sites produced not just building hardware, but also the tools that workers needed to do their jobs. These on-site manufacturing operations had to coordinate with broader tool supply networks while providing immediate support for construction activities. The transportation systems developed for moving workers between different parts of large construction projects were surprisingly sophisticated. Major castle construction sites often covered extensive areas with different work activities, occurring simultaneously at multiple locations. Moving workers, tools, and materials efficiently between these different work areas required careful planning and coordination. Some sites developed internal transportation networks using carts, boats, or even simple rail systems for moving heavy materials. Communication systems for coordinating work across large construction sites relied on a combination of visual signals, messengers, and standardized procedures. Different work crews had to coordinate their activities to avoid conflicts and ensure that materials and equipment were available when needed. Horn signals might indicate the start and end of work periods or warn of dangerous operations. Messengers carried detailed instructions between different work areas. Standardized procedures ensured that routine operations could proceed smoothly without constant supervision. The waste management systems established at construction sites addressed both practical and environmental concerns. Large construction projects generated enormous quantities of waste materials that had to be disposed of safely and efficiently. Stone chips and damaged materials could often be used for other purposes like road construction or landfilling. Organic waste from food preparation and animal care had to be managed to prevent disease and pest problems. Effective waste management was essential for maintaining sanitary conditions in crowded construction camps. Security systems for protecting construction sites, materials, and workers were complex operations that required constant vigilance. Valuable materials like cut stone, iron fittings, and specialized tools were attractive targets for thieves. Workers' personal belongings and wages also needed protection. Construction sites often employed dedicated security personnel who patrolled work areas and living quarters. Guard posts were established at strategic locations to monitor access to construction sites and storage areas. The financial administration systems used for managing construction project budgets were remarkably sophisticated for their time. Master builders had to track expenses across dozens of different categories while maintaining accurate records of payments to hundreds of individual workers and suppliers. These accounting systems provided regular reports to project sponsors while identifying cost overruns and budget problems before they became critical. Some master builders developed reputation for exceptional financial management that made them highly sought after for major projects. Procurement strategies for obtaining specialized materials and services required extensive knowledge of regional markets and supplier capabilities. Master builders had to evaluate potential suppliers based not just on price, but also on quality, reliability, and delivery capabilities. Long-term contracts with trusted suppliers provided price stability and assured availability of critical materials. Backup suppliers were identified to ensure continued operations if primary suppliers encountered problems. Quality assurance programs for materials and workmanship relied on the expertise and integrity of master craftsmen, but were supported by systematic inspection and testing procedures. Incoming materials were inspected to ensure they met project specifications. Work in progress was regularly inspected to identify problems before they could compromise later construction phases. Finished work was subjected to final inspections that verified compliance with design requirements and quality standards. The documentation systems maintained during construction provided accountability and helped resolve disputes while preserving valuable knowledge for future projects. Master builders kept detailed records of construction methods, material specifications, and lessons learned that could be applied to future projects. These records were often consulted years later when repairs or modifications were needed. The preservation of this documentation helped advance construction knowledge and techniques across the industry. Training and development programs for construction personnel went far beyond basic apprenticeship systems to include specialized education in advanced techniques and technologies. Promising young workers might be sent to other construction sites to learn specialized skills or observe innovative techniques. Master craftsmen regularly shared knowledge and techniques with colleagues working on different projects. These knowledge exchange programs helped spread innovations and improvements throughout the construction industry. The research and development activities conducted during major construction projects led to significant innovations in building techniques and technologies. Master builders regularly experimented with new materials, construction methods, and design approaches. Successful innovations were carefully documented and shared with other builders through professional networks. These research activities were driven by the practical challenges of construction work rather than theoretical considerations, resulting in innovations that were immediately applicable to real-world building projects. The legacy systems established during construction ensured that knowledge and expertise developed during major projects would be preserved and transmitted to future generations. Master builders took responsibility for training successors who could maintain and repair their constructions. Detailed records were maintained that documented construction methods and materials used in different parts of castle structures. These legacy systems helped ensure that medieval constructions could be properly maintained and repaired for centuries after their completion. The environmental impact assessment procedures used by medieval builders were informal but surprisingly thorough in their consideration of long-term effects. Construction sites were evaluated for their impact on local water supplies, agricultural productivity, and community welfare. Master builders understood that projects which damaged local environments or communities would face ongoing problems with material supplies, worker recruitment, and political support. Environmental considerations were integrated into project planning from the earliest stages. The community relations programs developed by construction projects addressed the social and economic disruption caused by large-scale building activities. Local communities often experienced significant changes when major construction projects began in their areas. Property values might change, traditional land uses might be disrupted, and local labour markets could be transformed. Successful builders learned to work with local communities to minimise negative impacts while maximising the economic benefits that construction projects could provide. The technology transfer programs that emerged from castle construction projects helped spread advanced building techniques throughout medieval society. Knowledge and skills developed for castle construction were often adapted for other types of building projects, including churches, bridges, mills, and residential construction. The organisational methods developed for managing large construction projects influenced other complex undertakings throughout medieval society. These technology transfer effects multiplied the impact of innovations developed during castle construction. The professional development opportunities created by castle construction provided career advancement possibilities that were rare in medieval society. Talented workers could advance from basic labourers to skilled craftsmen, to project supervisors through demonstrated competence and dedication. Some individuals advanced far enough to become master builders themselves, achieving wealth and social status that would have been impossible in other occupations. These advancement opportunities attracted ambitious individuals who contributed significantly to construction innovation and excellence. The international collaboration that characterized major castle construction projects created cultural exchange opportunities that influenced European development in ways that extended far beyond architecture. Workers from different regions brought diverse traditions, techniques, and perspectives that enriched construction practices while fostering cultural understanding. These international collaborations contributed to the gradual integration of European society and the development of shared cultural and technical traditions that influenced European development for centuries. The preservation of construction knowledge through practical application rather than written documentation created both opportunities and challenges for technological advancement. Knowledge that survived the test of practical use was thoroughly validated and refined through generations of application. However, valuable innovations could be lost when experienced practitioners died before fully training successors or when economic disruptions interrupted normal knowledge transmission processes. The balance between practical validation and knowledge preservation influenced the development of European technical education systems. The standardization of construction practices that emerged from medieval castle building established precedents for professional standards and quality control that influenced European industrial development. Common terminology, measurement systems, and quality standards facilitated communication and cooperation between builders from different regions. These standardization efforts laid groundwork for the more formal professional standards that would later support European industrial and commercial development. The project management innovations developed during castle construction established organizational principles and practices that influenced complex undertakings throughout European society. The coordination of multiple work crews, management of complex supply chains, and integration of diverse technical specialties required sophisticated organizational capabilities that were later adapted for other applications. Military organizations, commercial enterprises, and government administrative systems all benefited from organizational innovations pioneered during castle construction. The economic development effects of castle construction extended far beyond the immediate impacts of construction spending and employment. The infrastructure created to support construction projects often became permanent assets that supported regional economic development for centuries. Improved roads, bridges, harbors, and communication networks built for construction projects continued to facilitate commerce and development long after construction was complete. The skills and knowledge developed during construction projects created human capital that contributed to regional economic advancement in numerous ways. The cultural significance of castle construction in medieval society went far beyond the practical functions of the completed structures. These massive building projects served as symbols of technological achievement and social capability that inspired confidence and pride throughout medieval communities. The artistic and architectural traditions developed during construction influenced European cultural development for centuries and continue to shape our understanding of medieval accomplishments and capabilities. The social transformation brought about by castle construction included new opportunities for education and advancement, the development of professional classes, and the creation of more complex social structures. The technical knowledge and organizational skills required for these projects encouraged literacy, numeracy, and specialized education that benefited European society far beyond the construction industry. The professional traditions established during this period influenced the development of European educational and social institutions for centuries. The technological legacy of medieval castle construction continues to influence modern building practices and engineering principles. Many of the structural concepts, material applications, and organizational methods developed during medieval construction remain relevant to contemporary building projects. The problem-solving approaches and quality control methods pioneered by medieval builders provide valuable insights for modern project managers and construction professionals dealing with complex technical challenges. The international cooperation required for major castle construction projects established precedents for the kind of complex multinational undertakings that characterize modern global society. The ability to coordinate resources, expertise, and labor across political and cultural boundaries was a remarkable medieval achievement that anticipated many features of contemporary international commerce and technical collaboration. The preservation of medieval construction knowledge through experimental archaeology and historical research provides valuable insights into human capabilities and technological development that inform our understanding of both historical achievements and contemporary possibilities. The skills and knowledge demonstrated by medieval builders challenge assumptions about technological progress while providing inspiration for addressing modern construction and engineering challenges using sustainable and environmentally responsible approaches. The recognition of medieval builders as skilled professionals rather than anonymous laborers reflects growing appreciation for the complexity and sophistication of medieval society. These individuals possessed advanced technical knowledge, organizational capabilities, and creative vision that enabled them to create architectural achievements that continue to inspire admiration and study centuries after their completion. Their legacy demonstrates the enduring value of combining technical expertise with creative vision and dedicated craftsmanship in creating structures that serve both practical needs and cultural aspirations. The financial records that survive from medieval castle construction reveal just how staggering these projects were in economic terms. When we talk about a castle costing £10,000 in medieval currency, we're not just talking about a large number on parchment. We're talking about the equivalent of draining the treasuries of multiple kingdoms for a single construction project. To put this in perspective, that amount of money could have purchased entire fleets of ships, funded military campaigns across multiple countries, or supported the living expenses of thousands of families for years. The way these enormous costs were financed tells us everything about the priorities and desperation of medieval rulers. Lords didn't just write checks from their existing wealth. They mortgaged their lands, borrowed from Italian banking houses at crushing interest rates, sold hereditary rights and privileges, and imposed new taxes that sometimes sparked rebellions among their own people. Some nobles literally bankrupted themselves building castles, leaving their heirs with massive debts that took generations to repay. But here's what makes this even more fascinating. Despite these crushing costs, the demand for castle construction never seemed to slow down. Every lord who saw his neighbour's impressive new fortification immediately wanted something bigger and better for himself. This created a medieval arms race where architectural ambition drove rulers to financial ruin. But they kept building anyway, because the political and social costs of not having an impressive castle were even higher than the economic costs of building one. The seasonal rhythms that governed medieval construction created a completely different relationship between builders and time than we understand today. Modern construction projects run year-round with artificial lighting, climate-controlled environments, and materials that can be used in almost any weather conditions. Medieval builders lived and worked according to natural cycles that dictated when different types of work could be performed safely and effectively. Winter wasn't just a slow season for castle construction. It was a complete shutdown period when most outdoor work became impossible. But master builders learned to use these forced breaks strategically. Winter months became planning periods when designs were refined, materials were prepared, and workers were trained in new techniques. Quarrymen used frozen ground conditions to their advantage, accessing stone deposits that were unreachable during muddy spring months. Carpenters worked in covered workshops, creating the wooden components that would be installed when construction resumed. The spring startup period required enormous coordination as thousands of workers returned from their winter activities and resumed their construction roles. Tools had to be redistributed, work assignments had to be updated based on progress made the previous season, and new workers had to be integrated into existing crews. Master builders who could manage these seasonal transitions smoothly gained significant advantages over competitors who struggled with the complexities of stopping and starting massive projects. Summer brought its own unique challenges, as the peak construction season created intense competition for skilled workers and materials. Every major construction project in a region competed for the same pool of experienced craftsmen, driving up wages and creating shortages of specialized skills. The most successful master builders developed strategies for retaining key workers year-round, even when construction was suspended, to ensure they would have experienced crews available when the busy season resumed. The logistics of feeding thousands of construction workers during peak season required agricultural planning that began years in advance. Castle construction projects negotiated contracts with farmers throughout surrounding regions to ensure adequate food supplies during the months when construction crews reached their largest sizes. These contracts often specified not just quantities and prices, but also quality standards and delivery schedules that could accommodate the unpredictable timing of construction activities. The social dynamics within these massive temporary communities were as complex as any medieval town. Workers came from different regions with different dialects, customs, and social backgrounds. Skilled craftsmen from urban workshops worked alongside rural labourers who had never been more than a few miles from their home villages. Foreign specialists brought techniques and perspectives from other countries, creating cultural mixing that was unusual in medieval society. These construction communities developed their own internal governance systems to maintain order and resolve conflicts among workers from diverse backgrounds. Informal leaders emerged from different work groups, and master builders learned to work with these natural hierarchies to maintain productivity and prevent disputes. Religious services, entertainment, and social activities were organized to build community cohesion among workers who might spend years living and working together. The gender dynamics of castle construction were more complex than traditional histories often acknowledge. While heavy construction work was performed primarily by men, women played essential roles throughout these projects. Women worked as brewers, bakers, seamstresses, and medical providers for the massive workforces. They managed household operations for married workers who brought their families to construction sites. Some women developed specialized skills in decorative crafts that were essential for completing castle interiors. Female workers often possessed knowledge and skills that were crucial for construction success, but weren't formally recognized in medieval record-keeping systems. Women who specialized in textile production created the tapestries, curtains, and furnishings that transformed cold stone structures into comfortable living spaces. Those who worked in food preparation understood nutrition and food preservation techniques that kept large workforces healthy during long construction projects. The medical knowledge developed at construction sites advanced medieval healthcare in ways that benefited society far beyond building projects. Construction injuries created opportunities for medical practitioners to develop expertise in treating fractures, wounds, and other trauma that was less common in normal medieval life. The concentration of medical cases at construction sites allowed for systematic observation and development of more effective treatment methods. Surgical techniques for treating construction injuries became more sophisticated as medical practitioners gained experience with large numbers of similar cases. Bone-setting procedures were refined through repeated practice with workers who had fallen from scaffolding or been injured by falling stones. Wound treatment methods were developed specifically for the types of cuts and punctures that were common in stone working and carpentry. These medical advances were later applied to treating injuries in other contexts throughout medieval society. The pharmaceutical knowledge that developed around construction sites included both traditional herbal remedies and innovative treatments for specific types of injuries. Medical practitioners learned which herbs were most effective for treating different types of pain and inflammation. They developed poultices and ointments specifically designed for construction-related injuries. Some construction sites maintained medicinal gardens where therapeutic plants were cultivated for treating worker injuries and illnesses. The prosthetic devices created for workers who lost limbs in construction accidents represented remarkable medieval engineering achievements. Craftsmen who specialized in creating tools and equipment adapted their skills to create artificial limbs that allowed injured workers to continue contributing to construction projects. These early prosthetic devices were often remarkably sophisticated, incorporating mechanical principles that enabled basic functionality for workers who had suffered amputations. Rehabilitation programs for injured workers helped them develop new skills that allowed continued employment, even when they couldn't return to their original construction roles. Workers who could no longer perform heavy physical labor might be retrained as tool makers, record keepers, or supervisors. These programs represented early forms of vocational rehabilitation that helped injured workers maintain their economic independence and social status. The insurance concepts that developed around construction projects provided some protection against the financial devastation that could result from accidents or project failures. Wealthy patrons sometimes formed partnerships that spread the financial risks of major construction projects among multiple investors. Master builders developed relationships with financial backers who could provide emergency funding when unexpected problems threatened project completion. Risk assessment procedures became increasingly sophisticated as master builders gained experience with the factors that could threaten construction success. Weather patterns were studied to predict optimal construction seasons and identify periods when work would need to be suspended. Political stability was evaluated to assess the likelihood that construction could continue without interruption from warfare or political upheaval. Market conditions were analysed to predict material costs and labour availability throughout projected construction periods. Contingency planning became a crucial skill for master builders who wanted to complete projects successfully, despite the numerous factors that could disrupt construction progress. Alternative supply sources were identified for critical materials in case primary suppliers encountered problems. Reserve funding was maintained to handle unexpected cost increases or construction delays. Backup plans were developed for critical construction phases that might be vulnerable to weather, political, or economic disruptions. The contract negotiation skills required for major construction projects were as important as technical building knowledge for ensuring project success. Master builders had to negotiate complex agreements with dozens of suppliers, subcontractors, and service providers, while protecting their own interests and meeting their patrons' requirements. These negotiations often involve not just financial terms, but also technical specifications, quality standards, delivery schedules, and procedures for handling problems or changes. Legal expertise became increasingly important as construction contracts became more complex and valuable. Master builders often worked with legal advisors who specialized in construction law and contract interpretation. Dispute resolution procedures were built into major contracts to provide mechanisms for resolving conflicts without completely disrupting construction progress. These legal frameworks provided some protection against the enormous financial risks involved in castle construction. The international trade networks that developed to support castle construction created commercial relationships that extended far beyond individual building projects. Quarries that supplied stone for castle construction often developed ongoing relationships with multiple construction projects across wide regions. Specialized craftsmen traveled between different countries to work on major projects, creating professional networks that facilitated knowledge exchange and innovation. The transportation innovations required for moving massive construction materials led to permanent improvements in medieval infrastructure that benefited commerce and communication for centuries. Roads built to transport castle construction materials were often maintained and improved long after construction was complete. Bridges built to support heavy construction traffic became permanent fixtures that facilitated trade and travel. Harbour improvements made to accommodate stone delivery boats continued to support maritime commerce. The technological innovations pioneered during castle construction found applications in numerous other areas of medieval life. Lifting devices developed for moving heavy stones were adapted for loading ships, constructing bridges, and building cathedrals. Surveying techniques refined for castle layout were used for town planning, agricultural development, and territorial mapping. The organizational methods developed for managing construction workforces influenced military organization, commercial enterprises, and government administration. The educational impact of castle construction extended far beyond the technical training provided to construction workers. These projects created opportunities for learning that weren't available elsewhere in medieval society. Young people could observe advanced techniques and technologies that were rarely seen outside major construction sites. The concentration of skilled craftsmen from different regions created unprecedented opportunities for knowledge exchange and innovation. Literacy and numeracy skills developed during construction projects proved valuable in many other areas of medieval life. Construction workers who learned to read technical drawings and calculate measurements often used these skills in other occupations after construction was complete. The record-keeping requirements of major construction projects encouraged the development of administrative and accounting skills that were transferable to commercial and governmental activities. The artistic traditions that emerged from castle construction influenced European cultural development for centuries. The sculptural and decorative techniques developed for castle ornamentation established artistic styles that were later applied to religious architecture, residential buildings, and decorative arts. Master craftsmen who gained experience creating artistic elements for castles often went on to work on cathedrals, palaces, and other prestigious projects that shaped European artistic traditions. The architectural innovations pioneered during castle construction contributed to the evolution of Gothic style and the development of increasingly sophisticated building techniques. Structural engineering principles developed for supporting massive castle walls and towers were later applied to creating the soaring spaces of Gothic cathedrals. Construction methods refined for castle building provided foundations for architectural achievements that defined European building traditions for centuries. The preservation of medieval construction knowledge through continuous practical application created technical traditions that survived for centuries after the medieval period ended. Master builders who learned their skills on castle projects passed their knowledge to apprentices who applied these techniques to other types of construction. Guild systems maintained technical standards and training programs that preserved construction knowledge through generations of craftsmen. The experimental archaeology projects that study medieval construction techniques today provide valuable insights into the sophisticated knowledge and skills possessed by medieval builders. Modern craftsmen who attempt to replicate medieval building methods using only historical tools and techniques gain deep appreciation for the expertise required to create these remarkable structures. These projects help bridge the gap between historical documentation and practical understanding of medieval construction achievements. The recognition of medieval castle builders as highly skilled professionals rather than anonymous labourers reflects growing understanding of the complexity and sophistication of medieval society. These individuals possessed technical knowledge, organisational capabilities, and creative vision that enabled them to create architectural achievements that continue to inspire admiration centuries after their completion. Their legacy demonstrates the enduring value of combining technical expertise with creative vision and dedicated craftsmanship. The international scope of medieval castle construction created cultural exchange opportunities that influenced European development in ways that extended far beyond architecture. Master builders who worked in multiple countries brought diverse traditions and techniques together, accelerating technological development and cultural integration. The professional networks that developed around castle construction facilitated communication and cooperation across political boundaries that contributed to European unity and shared cultural development. The economic development effects of castle construction created lasting changes that shaped European society for centuries. The infrastructure improvements made to support construction projects continue to facilitate commerce and development long after building was complete. The technical knowledge and organizational skills developed during construction projects contributed to European industrial and commercial development. The professional traditions established during medieval castle construction influenced European educational and social institutions. The social mobility opportunities created by castle construction provided advancement possibilities that were rare in medieval society. Talented individuals could rise from humble origins to achieve wealth, status, and recognition through demonstrated competence in construction work. Some master builders accumulated enough wealth and influence to purchase land and achieve noble status themselves. These advancement opportunities attracted ambitious individuals who made significant contributions to construction innovation and excellence. The cultural significance of castles in medieval society extended far beyond their practical functions as military fortifications and noble residences. These impressive structures served as symbols of technological achievement and social capability that inspired confidence and pride throughout medieval communities. The artistic and architectural traditions developed during construction influenced European cultural development for centuries and continue to shape our understanding of medieval accomplishments. The environmental impact of castle construction created lasting changes in European landscapes that are still visible today. Quarries opened for construction projects became permanent features that influenced regional development patterns. Transportation networks built to support construction often became trade routes that shaped economic development for centuries. The demand for construction materials led to forest management practices and agricultural changes that permanently altered local environments. The technological legacy of medieval castle construction continues to influence modern building practices and engineering principles. Structural concepts developed for castle construction remain relevant to contemporary building projects. Material applications pioneered by medieval builders provide insights for modern sustainable construction practices. The problem-solving approaches developed by medieval builders offer valuable lessons for addressing contemporary engineering challenges. The preservation of medieval construction knowledge through historical research and practical experimentation provides valuable insights into human technological capabilities and development. The achievements of medieval builders challenge assumptions about technological progress, while demonstrating the potential for combining traditional knowledge with innovative approaches. Their legacy continues to inspire modern builders, engineers, and architects who seek to create structures that serve both practical needs and cultural aspirations. Structures that serve both practical needs and cultural aspirations. The documentation systems that survived from medieval castle construction reveal just how meticulously these projects were managed, despite the common assumption that medieval record-keeping was primitive or haphazard. Master builders maintained detailed accounts that tracked everything from daily wage payments to individual stone deliveries, creating archives that modern project managers would recognize as surprisingly sophisticated. These records weren't just financial documents either. They included technical specifications, quality control notes, and even weather observations that affected construction schedules. What makes these surviving documents so fascinating is how they reveal the personalities and decision-making processes of individual master builders. You can see their handwriting change as projects progressed, becoming more hurried during crisis periods or more elaborate during successful phases. Some records include personal notes about worker performance, supplier reliability, or design modifications that provide intimate glimpses into the daily challenges these men faced while managing projects that could employ more people than lived in most medieval towns. The international correspondence between master builders created professional networks that spanned the known world. Letters between colleagues working on different projects discussed technical problems, shared innovative solutions, and even included detailed drawings of new construction techniques. Master James of St. George maintained correspondence with builders working across Europe, exchanging information about everything from mortar formulations to lifting device designs. These professional relationships were so valuable that builders often recommended colleagues for positions with other noble patrons, creating a kind of medieval headhunting network for construction talent. The standardization of measurements and techniques that emerged from this international collaboration was crucial for enabling the increasingly complex projects that defined later medieval architecture. When builders from different regions worked together, they had to reconcile different measurement systems, tool designs, and construction methods. Over time, this collaboration led to the adoption of common standards that made it possible for components created in different locations to fit together perfectly when assembled at construction sites. The quality control procedures that developed during major castle projects were remarkably systematic despite the absence of modern testing equipment. Master masons developed techniques for evaluating stone quality that involved not just visual inspection, but also sound tests, stress tests, and even taste tests for certain types of stone. They could identify internal flaws in stone blocks by tapping them with hammers and listening to the resulting sounds. They tested mortar consistency by feel and could predict how different formulations would perform under various weather conditions. These quality control methods were passed down through generations of craftsmen who refined them through continuous practical application. Each master builder added his own innovations and improvements to the techniques he had learned as an apprentice. The most successful builders developed reputations for exceptional quality control that made their services highly sought after by demanding patrons who wanted castles that would last for centuries. The testing procedures for new construction techniques involved carefully controlled experiments that would be recognizable to modern engineers. When builders wanted to try innovative approaches, they often tested them on smaller, less critical parts of their projects before applying them to major structural elements. Failed experiments were carefully documented to prevent others from repeating the same mistakes. Successful innovations were gradually refined and incorporated into standard practice. The maintenance planning that was built into castle designs from the beginning reveals the long-term thinking that characterized medieval construction. Master builders understood that their structures would need ongoing care and repair for centuries, and they designed systems that would make this maintenance possible. Hidden passages provided access to critical structural elements for inspection and repair. Removable sections allowed major components to be replaced when they wore out. Storage spaces were included for maintenance materials and tools. Replacement schedules were established for components that were expected to wear out over time. Wooden elements like roof structures and interior floors were designed to be replaceable without compromising the stone structure. Hardware like hinges, locks, and window fittings were standardized to ensure that replacement parts could be manufactured years or decades later. These forward-thinking approaches helped ensure that medieval castles could be maintained and updated throughout their operational lives. The environmental considerations that influenced castle design were more sophisticated than often recognized. Master builders understood how local climate conditions would affect their structures and designed accordingly. In regions with heavy rainfall, elaborate drainage systems prevented water from undermining foundations or penetrating walls. In areas subject to earthquakes, flexible construction techniques allowed buildings to move without collapsing. Coastal castles incorporated features to resist salt air corrosion and storm damage. Site selection involved careful analysis of soil conditions, drainage patterns, and exposure to weather extremes. The best castle sites provided natural defensive advantages while also offering good construction conditions and access to materials. Master builders learned to read landscape features that indicated suitable foundation conditions and adequate water supplies. They understood how prevailing wind patterns would affect both defensive capabilities and daily comfort for castle residents. The adaptation of construction techniques to local materials created regional variations in castle architecture that reflected both practical constraints and cultural preferences. Regions with abundant limestone developed different building traditions than areas where sandstone or granite was the primary building material. Areas with extensive forests incorporated more wooden elements than regions where timber was scarce. These material-driven variations created the distinctive regional styles that make medieval architecture so diverse and interesting. Local labor traditions also influence construction methods and architectural styles. Regions with strong stoneworking traditions developed different approaches than areas where woodworking or metalworking were the dominant crafts. The skills and preferences of local craftsmen shaped the techniques used and the aesthetic choices made during construction. Master builders learned to work with these local traditions while introducing innovations and improvements from their broader experience. The economic relationships between castle construction projects and surrounding communities were complex and often mutually beneficial, despite the disruptions that major construction caused. Local suppliers of materials and services often experienced significant economic benefits from proximity to major construction projects. Farmers could sell food supplies at premium prices to feed large construction workforces. Craftsmen found expanded markets for their products and services. Merchants discovered new opportunities for importing and distributing specialized materials. However, these economic benefits came with costs and disruptions that affected entire regions. Increased demand for materials often drove up prices for local residents who weren't connected to construction projects. Competition for skilled workers could drain local communities of their most talented craftsmen. The temporary nature of construction employment meant that local economies experienced boom and bust cycles that could be destabilizing for communities that became too dependent on construction activity. The technological innovations that emerged from castle construction had impacts that extended far beyond building applications. Precision measurement techniques developed for construction were adapted for navigation, surveying, and scientific investigation. Mathematical concepts used for calculating structural loads and proportions contributed to advances in engineering and physics. The organizational methods developed for managing complex construction projects influenced military logistics, commercial operations, and government administration. Mechanical innovations like improved pulleys, levers, and lifting devices found applications in agriculture, manufacturing, and transportation. Water management techniques developed for castle construction were applied to irrigation systems, mill operations, and urban infrastructure. The metallurgical advances required for producing construction tools and hardware contributed to improvements in weapons, agricultural implements, and manufacturing equipment. The educational impact of castle construction created opportunities for intellectual development that wouldn't have been available otherwise in medieval society. The mathematical knowledge required for construction work encouraged numeracy skills that were rare among medieval populations. Reading and writing skills developed for maintaining construction records proved valuable in commercial and administrative activities. The technical knowledge gained through construction work provided foundations for careers in engineering, architecture, and related fields. Apprenticeship programs associated with castle construction provided structured educational opportunities that were more comprehensive than typical medieval training. Young people learned not just manual skills, but also planning, problem-solving, and leadership capabilities. The international character of many construction projects exposed apprentices to different cultures, languages, and techniques that broadened their perspectives and capabilities. The artistic education that occurred during castle construction influenced European cultural development for centuries. Young artists and craftsmen learned advanced techniques while working on decorative elements for castle interiors and exteriors. They studied proportions, design principles, and aesthetic traditions that were later applied to religious architecture, manuscript illumination, and decorative arts. Some of Europe's greatest artists received their early training while working on castle construction projects. The preservation of artistic traditions through castle construction helped maintain cultural continuity during periods of political and social disruption. When other institutions were destroyed or abandoned during warfare or economic collapse, the artistic traditions maintained by construction craftsmen provided continuity that helped preserve European cultural heritage. These traditions were later revived and elaborated during periods of cultural renaissance. The social changes brought about by castle construction included new forms of professional identity and social organization that influenced European society for centuries. The emergence of construction professionals created new social categories that didn't fit traditional medieval hierarchies of nobles, clergy, and peasants. Master builders achieved wealth and status that challenged existing social structures while creating new models for professional advancement based on skill and achievement rather than birth or religious vocation. Professional organizations like construction guilds developed governance structures and educational systems that influenced the evolution of European institutions. Guild regulations established standards for training, quality control, and professional conduct that served as models for other professional organizations. The international character of construction work created professional networks that transcended political boundaries and contributed to European cultural integration. The legal innovations required for managing complex construction contracts contributed to the development of commercial law and business practices throughout European society. Contract terms and dispute resolution procedures developed for construction projects were later applied to other types of commercial transactions. The financial instruments created for funding major construction projects influenced banking and investment practices that supported European economic development. Property rights concepts that emerged from construction law helped establish legal frameworks that protected investment and encouraged economic development. The intellectual property concepts that protected construction innovations and techniques provided models for later systems that protected artistic, literary, and technological innovations. These legal developments contributed to the institutional foundations that supported European economic and cultural development. The international cooperation required for major castle construction projects established precedents for the kind of complex multinational undertakings that characterize modern global society. The coordination of resources, expertise, and labor across political and cultural boundaries demonstrated possibilities for international collaboration that influenced diplomatic, commercial, and cultural relationships throughout European history. The diplomatic relationships that developed through construction projects created channels for communication and cooperation between different kingdoms and regions. Master builders often served as informal ambassadors who facilitated relationships between their various noble patrons. The personal relationships formed during construction projects sometimes influenced political alliances and commercial agreements that had implications far beyond the building industry. The cultural exchange that occurred during international construction projects contributed to the gradual development of shared European cultural traditions. Workers from different regions brought diverse customs, techniques, and perspectives that enriched local cultures while creating synthesis that influenced broader cultural development. The artistic and architectural innovations that emerged from this cultural mixing helped create distinctive European styles that combined influences from multiple traditions. The technological transfer that occurred through international construction cooperation accelerated technological development throughout Europe. Innovations developed in one region were quickly spread to other areas through the networks of professional relationships that connected construction projects across the continent. This technology transfer helped ensure that advances in construction techniques, materials science, and project management were rapidly adopted wherever they could provide benefits. The preservation of construction knowledge through practical application, rather than written documentation, created both advantages and challenges for technological development. Knowledge that survived was thoroughly tested and validated through generations of practical use, ensuring that surviving techniques were genuinely effective and reliable. However, valuable innovations could be lost when experienced practitioners died before fully training successors or when economic disruptions interrupted normal knowledge transmission processes. The experimental approach that characterized medieval construction encouraged continuous innovation and improvement that kept building techniques advancing despite the challenges of knowledge preservation. Master builders regularly experimented with new approaches while maintaining careful attention to proven methods that ensured structural integrity and project success. This balance between innovation and conservation helped advance construction technology while maintaining the reliability that patrons demanded for their enormous investments. The documentation efforts that have preserved medieval construction knowledge for modern study represent only a fraction of the technical expertise that was developed during this period. Most construction knowledge was transmitted through hands-on training and practical experience that wasn't recorded in written form. The surviving documents provide glimpses into the sophistication of medieval construction practices, while suggesting that the full extent of medieval technical achievements may never be completely understood. Modern archaeological investigations continue to reveal evidence of construction techniques and capabilities that weren't documented in surviving written records. Excavations at castle sites uncover evidence of sophisticated foundation systems, advanced water management techniques, and innovative structural solutions that demonstrate the remarkable technical competence of medieval builders. These discoveries help modern researchers appreciate the true complexity and sophistication of medieval construction achievements. The legacy of medieval castle construction continues to influence modern building practices and professional traditions in ways that are often unrecognized. Many organizational methods, quality control procedures, and professional standards that are considered modern innovations actually have roots in practices developed during medieval construction projects. The professional ethics, training standards, and technical approaches that characterize modern construction industries evolved from foundations established by medieval master builders and craftsmen. The recognition of medieval builders as skilled professionals, rather than anonymous laborers, reflects growing understanding of the complexity and sophistication of medieval society that challenges traditional assumptions about technological and social development. These individuals possessed advanced knowledge, sophisticated skills, and professional standards that enabled remarkable achievements under challenging circumstances. Their legacy demonstrates the enduring value of combining technical expertise with creative vision, dedicated craftsmanship, and professional integrity in creating structures that serve both practical needs and cultural aspirations. Cultural aspirations. So there you have it. The next time you see a medieval castle rising from the countryside, you'll know the truth. It wasn't built by kings snapping their fingers or nameless peasants hauling stones. It was created by master architects like James of St. George, skilled craftsmen who spent decades perfecting their trades, and thousands of workers whose expertise made the impossible possible. These weren't primitive construction sites, but sophisticated engineering operations that would challenge modern project managers. Their legacy lives on today, proving that true craftsmanship transcends time itself.